our advanced cancer diagnostic scanners are giving more and more people access to a healthier life. Now, technology is hope.
Well, 282 for 3 at lunch. Are India on day 2, and yes, it is a day 2 when Sachin Tendulkar batted well, but didn't get 100. But India are 100 in front. It's our obsession with hundreds that makes us always want more in cricket. But Tendulkar's 74 is going to be much of the talking point here on Match Point at lunch in the second test. That'll be for a little later, because we're going to start off with something that happened most glaring and most recently just after Tendulkar's dismissal. Sanjay, Manjrekar, Ajit, Agarkar are with us at lunch, and Ajit's second ball of the 53rd over, Shane Shillingford to Pujara, nice little bat pad, or rather a ball that went to short leg. And there was a catch that everyone thought was a catch except one man in the umpire's box. Your first reaction to that 53rd over?
Yeah, tough one on the West Indies. I mean, you could see it. I mean, the field umpire went up to the third umpire and, you know, as less critical as you want to be with the umpire, I mean, it was glaring. You could see the fingers were right under the ball. I didn't see too much doubt with it. So I'm not sure what the third umpire was thinking. And West Indies could really feel hard done by. I mean, you know, picked up Tendulkar just before that, and to have picked up Pujara then would have been a massive wicket for them.
Both set batsmen could have been out before lunch. Sanjay, your friend Nigel Long was the man at the standing end and went upstairs. Now the umpire is well within his right to go upstairs for a catch which he isn't sure of live, but the replay suggested that Mr. Long had a better view and shouldn't have gone up. What do you make of the entire thing?
Yeah, if people were watching the television and there was a view of, you know, from fine leg, from behind the batsman where the short leg fielder is taking the catch, you can see Nigel Long sort of looking, and he had a perfectly good view of what happened. Nothing was in the way to obstruct that view. And I've always held the view as commentator that, you know, when you're pretty certain on the field that the catch is taken, better make the decision yourself. Because once you go upstairs, and camera with its limitations, 17 frames per second sometimes, so you lose some moments in between the frames, and it just complicates matters. Now here, the matter wasn't complicated. I think everyone who saw it on television as well felt that there was no doubt in that catch at all. So yes, that's a bad mistake.
That's a bad mistake.
Not a good mistake. Bad mistake from Vinay Kulkarni.
By the third umpire, let's defend Mr. Long. He is in his rights to go upstairs. But, well, between everyone in the field knew it, everyone in the commentary box knew it, we in the studio knew it, but between three umpires, they couldn't get it right. But let's look at the match scorecard and where we stand at lunch on day 2 of the second test match. India 282 for 3 after Sachin Tendulkar and Cheteshwar Pujara resumed this morning. Pujara still batting 85 seamlessly almost. Nobody even thought there was a second batsman. It was like Tendulkar was playing single wicket for the morning session. They did get a wicket, and it was the unlikely source of Narsingh Devanarayan. Sammy was involved, taking a sharp catch at first slip that probably ended the batting career of Sachin Tendulkar, but you never know. Things can change in 3 days of cricket. As far as the West Indies bowling are concerned, it was again Shane Shillingford who threatened the most, didn't get a wicket, should have got Pujara like we just mentioned, Devanarayan with the other one. But the seam bowlers bowled better, the fast bowlers bowled better than their figures might suggest, and we're going to talk about that as well. But before we talk about the bowlers, this session would be absolutely unjust if we don't talk about Sachin Tendulkar. He did bat 74 very, very pretty runs, and there's an interesting point on when he went back after his innings, and there's an expression that you'd like to talk about and what it would have meant to him first.
Yeah, Ajit and me, we were both talking about that moment when the camera caught him immediately after he got out in the dressing room, where he was, you know, talking to somebody as to the way he got out and things like that. What was really noticeable for me was that if he was an active player, if this had happened 4 or 5 years back, you would have seen him very upset, hurt by the dismissal. So he's talking and there is a little smile on his face. And I just wonder whether that moment tells you about his mindset currently, where he feels that he's a bit relieved. And we also talked about, Ajit has got a few things to share about that moment, which he's sure, I think.
Ajit, on that moment?
Yeah, I think it must be relief. I mean, look at the build-up to these couple of tests, especially in Mumbai right now. Huge pressure. Got to bat just once in Kolkata, so didn't get runs there. So the kind of pressure he must be, and he batted beautifully. I mean, he just looked good today. I think that's probably the best he's batted for a while. So that must be one of the things that he enjoyed going back in there. I'm sure he would have loved to get 100, but going back in there, he would have felt, it was a pretty innings, as you said. And that is what would have pleased him the most. He batted beautifully through the morning, didn't look phased, apart from a few overs with Tino Best, which was a contest, but otherwise, looked good. I mean, looked like a proper Sachin Tendulkar.
Yeah, that's a very good point he makes, because just imagine his frame of mind. Tendulkar, he's a great player, legend of the game, but imagine the last few months that he's had, Champions League included, where he kept getting out very early, kept getting out bowled. So his confidence would not have been that high. That match against Haryana Ranji game would have certainly helped. But perhaps there was that little fear, in spite of him being one of the greatest batsmen ever, that he didn't want to get out in the fashion that he did in the Champions League and some of the international matches before that. This is, as he said, a Tendulkar that we haven't seen bat so well for a long time. Somewhere that also must have been a sense of relief that in this presumably, final innings, he didn't go out there and again look like he was finished and just overstayed. So this was an innings that will tell a few fans that there is still that international game intact in Tendulkar. May not have come as consistently in the past, but this innings was international standard, and Tendulkar looked at home against an attack which is not the greatest, but I think that must have also given him great pleasure and a sense of relief.
Yeah, well, like we said, it was a very, very pretty innings to watch. If you've been missing cricket in the last 24 years because of work, well, then what have you been doing? But the point was, if you saw that innings of Tendulkar, it summed up a lot of what he's done over there. So we're going to talk about that vintage Tendulkar that we saw. But quickly, the 74 that Sachin Tendulkar did make and where it stands as to people who sign off on a high, and Tendulkar will be one of those who will sign off on a high. Vijay Merchant leads that list. If you look at the top scores in a final test for Indian batsmen, 154 against England. That would have been a long time ago. Vijay Manjrekar is 102 not out. Sanjay, you'd recall some memories of that innings with your father telling you.
Actually, it's a great story. My father, I think that was the last test match of that series against New Zealand, and after first inning, this may have happened in the second innings. After the first inning, the Indian team for the next series was announced, and my father was not named in that Indian team. So obviously he was very upset. He announced his retirement out of hurt and disappointment, maybe a bit of anger as well, because he was quite an angry person. I was petrified of it. So that happened, and just to make a point, went out in the second innings and got 100. It's a great story that.
Yeah, when it ends nicely. Like Sanjay and Ajit have said, Tendulkar didn't end this with people feeling sorry for him or saying, okay, time is up. He didn't get bowled the way he did in the Champions League. It was a very, very fine innings. And what attributed that fine innings, Ajit, were the kinds of shots that he played. Now, if you look at that, that Tendulkar of old, you saw a back foot punch. I want to talk to Sanjay about the shots that we missed, and here's that little memory of a lofted shot. But just the shots he played, the back foot punch, he started playing the paddle. You saw Tendulkar that was a lot more free. Was that surprising, or was that nice to see?
A little bit surprising, I think, because as I said, it's a massive, massive test for him. I mean, someone who's been around for so long. There's got to be a lot of emotions in there. And since last evening, he looked relaxed. That's the, we've seen him a little bit nervous at the start of his innings recently, but he didn't look that at all. Just played his shots, and you could see. It just looked at home.
If you take a look at where Sachin Tendulkar did play his shots, it was all around the wicket. There wasn't a vintage pull shot or a hook shot that we've come to know of Tendulkar, but everything else was there. Sanjay, if you look at that wagon wheel, it tells you that he's played all the shots that he's known to play, but there was something missing. What do you make of what was there and what wasn't?
Now, this is the wagon wheel that I like of Tendulkar. If you look at the white lines, there are lots of white lines in front of the wicket, the straight drives. Tendulkar's natural game has always been in front of the wicket. Anything that is played behind the wickets, something that he developed later, much later, to just take risks out of his game. So it was again going away from his natural game. I'm glad there are not too many whites overslips. A shot that he likes to play, but I've never liked it. When Tendulkar starts nudging, a couple of times they did that to Tino Best, trying to nudge him over slips, and to Shillingford, and then when he got out. When he starts nudging, I feel that now he's playing that unnatural game just to ensure that it gets his next 10-15 runs. So the only little hint of disappointment in that innings for me was that he got out playing a nudging shot, where he was trying to just nudge it past slip.
What is that attributed to? That regularity of playing that shot even though he's not getting it right. He tried it once, twice, he survived a very close call for a caught behind. Good decision by umpire Kettleborough. I think he's one of the, he's the better one from the two. We're having a better game. He makes the good mistakes. Yeah, but that was a good, why does he still try it? Is it something to do with age that he just wants to, it's an easier shot to play?
Let's be honest, I mean, if he's tried it 10 times, then he gets it right 8 times. He gets a lot of, it's a relief shot as well sometimes. And when bowlers keep bowling outside the off stump, he can leave it. But there's also that temptation that if he just puts bat to ball with that 4 runs for the taking.
Correct.
But I've said this on the show that when he was young, he had an international batting mechanism where he used to pull that kind of delivery, pull it. And because he comes from India, there's so much expectation. They want him to get hundreds. All that natural flair, he has curbed it over the last so many years. It's been all about getting hundreds. And this shot came by abandoning this shot, he started playing this. Again, when he starts nudging, it's not my favorite Tendulkar, but he gets it right very often. Today, a couple of times he missed it very badly.
Yeah, we've seen him in one-day cricket get those shots, and did it well in the 2003 World Cup as well. So you think that Tendulkar back himself to get it, but well, one thing we have to give credit to when this did happen was the way the West Indies bowled to him. And Ajit, we were talking about it in the morning, we were talking about it at Stumps yesterday on how the West Indies haven't really got it right, the line, the plan. Today we saw a much better contest. The West Indies have either watched match point or they've got they've got their heads together, the right ones, and they did bowl better this morning.
Yeah, I mean, better late than never. But because, I mean, if they'd bowled that up front yesterday, might have made a bit of a difference. But today you've got to give credit to them. I mean, to be fair, Tino Best came out, running in hard, trying to upset the batsman or trying to get something out of the situation. And it worked. I mean, that was the only time it looked like there was a contest. I mean, and then Gabriel sort of backed it up, and Shillingford's obviously been the danger man for them. So yeah, I mean, if they, it's going to be a hard ask to keep doing that all day.
Yeah,
but if they keep doing
if I could just take your attention, Ajit, to how Tino Best bowled to Tendulkar, and what we did see was there was a lot more. You could see the angle with which Best bowls. A lot of those balls would have gone on in the direction of the stumps. There's also a lot of short pitch bowling. So clearly a plan which was different from the previous days.
For sure. I mean, just to be a little bit critical, you could have pitched a few balls up, but again, he kept Sachin and Pujara quiet for a bit, which they didn't manage to do yesterday. So whatever he was doing worked, and it looked like a contest out there. I mean, that is what you want to see in Test cricket, not just one-sided. And yeah, I mean, for a period it worked, and it's going to be tough to do that all day. But at least in the first session, they've been good.
Okay. Right, so since we are talking about Best, the other thing I'd put in is we were questioning Tino Best on why he doesn't bowl longer spells. Now, just a quick word for you before we get the man who's got the wisdom on fast bowling in the West Indies, Michael Holding, is going to just give you a little bit on match point on this show. But longer spells from Tino Best is just not understandable as to why he can't bowl more. Would you take a Best and bowl him 3, 4 overs, or just make him bowl through?
No, I mean, it depends on an individual, really. Right. Some people like bowling long spells, but if you look at him as an impact bowler, then you've got to use him in shorter spells where there's, he's running in to get a wicket. And it just depends on what their plans are and how they look at it. But it just depends on an individual. Some people like bowling long spells where they get into a spell and then start getting better as the spell goes on.
Okay.
Well, at least today there was an attempt to be aggressive. Yesterday when we saw that same pitch map, there was one short ball, and we talked about it. We said, Ajit Agarkar, for his 56 kgs at the international level, bowled more short deliveries than a Tino Best, who is built to bowl quick and short. So at least that came in. Saurav Ganguly was right on air when he said that he didn't pitch it further enough. But then they also saw, I mean, Best saw that whenever he bowled short, Tendulkar struggled a bit. So he got a bit carried away with the short ball. Anything that was pitched up was driven. You can understand his reluctance to bowl full. But at least there was some intent today from Tino Best, which was lacking completely yesterday.
Okay, well, yeah, we are talking about the West Indian fast bowling. Now, the one thing that, like Ajit said, you need to go individually is because probably the West Indies have been plagued with far too many injuries. It's happening in a trend of sorts in recent times. Now, Michael Holding did catch up with us before the test and spoke a little bit about what's happening with the West Indies fast bowlers and why they aren't able to sustain themselves when they start playing Test cricket. Here's what Mikey had to say.
I think one of the problems that we have had with these young fast bowlers when they have come into the West Indies team is that because they have shown a bit of talent before they get into the team, the captain, the coach, the administration, all of a sudden these guys are being asked to lead the attack, to do the bulk of the work. Kimar Roach is the most recent example. Came into the West Indies team, showed great pace, showed great aptitude for fast bowling, but all of a sudden he was the leader of the attack. Being asked to bowl too mmany overs, in my opinion, and not being able to sustain it. Fidel Edwards similarly before him. Fidel Edwards was, I think, discovered in the nets. Immediately he came into the West Indies team, he was being asked to do the amount of work that his body could not manage. So he never really got to the heights that he could have gotten to. You cannot ask these young guys to come into the team and all automatically be the leaders. They have got to be there, learning from others and slowly building up their strength, fitness and strength, to be able to take over the load of the work later on in their careers.
Okay, Ajit, I have to bring you in immediately on that. Now, you need to have a leader in the bowling attack when you immediately start Test cricket. How important is it to have that senior bowler in the team who you can go to when you're not sure, when we don't know what to do, and the pitch isn't helping? Did you have that in your initial days in Test cricket?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Srinath was already playing for a good 7, 8, 9 years when I played, and he by then knew how to bowl in international cricket, which makes a massive difference. I mean, you need a leader of an attack.
Yeah.
You need a guy who's had experience being in different situations, having bowled in different situations or conditions. And look, I mean, what Mikey said is right, but unfortunately for the West Indies, they've not had it for a while now. After I think Courtney Walsh retired, they've not had one bowler who's played for a few years, who's actually gained that experience by playing, and that obviously hurts them. I mean, it's more difficult for a younger bowler, even if it's a tearaway, to come and might make a quick impact, but to sustain it sometimes becomes a bit difficult.
Sanjay, the teams that you've seen, you've seen the seniors in the team, Kapil Devs and Imran Khans, and then the younger fast bowlers coming. It's an important attribute to have in a team.
I think that's a big shift that has happened from the Test cricket, especially 70s to 80s and later on. I wonder whether it's because of excessive cricket, because a lot of fast bowlers are now breaking down, and so 50 Test matches, Fidel Edwards is not available for West Indies most of the time. I remember my first exposure at the Test level. I played my first tour to West Indies had a Marshall who had played 70, 80 Test matches. There was an Ambrose who had played 50. There was a Courtney Walsh who would have played 40, 50, and then a young Rob Bishop. So there is experience in that attack. Then to New Zealand, there was a Richard Hadley there was a Bracewell, there was a Danny Morrison who had played quite a bit, and then a young rookie bowler. Pakistan, there was an Imran Khan who would have played, 80, 90 Test matches. There was Abdul Qadir there, and then you had Wasim Akram, and then a Waqar Yunus playing his first series. So that was the trend. All English, Australian, Western bowling attacks had 2 or 3 senior bowlers, and there would be one young rookie coming in. Now, you see very often with the international side is that you'll have 3 guys, very new, and maybe at the most one, who's played 10, 15. In this case, and an experienced bowler is always more difficult to face in a Test match situation than a young, talented bowler. Yeah,
well, putting Sanjay's point in perspective, you look at the international Test teams of the world today, barring perhaps England and South Africa, which are the premier sides, and for that you can establish with reason. There's no other team where you look at one fast bowler who stands out with 50, 60 plus Test matches. Even India in this Test match have gone in with 2 relatively inexperienced seamers. Test teams around the world, so it's a changing trend. What else is a changing trend, Ajit, is the way bowlers look these days. Physically, you always think the bowler's the mean-built, strong, tough guy. Now, Ajit managed all the skills with getting wickets without having that physical, that fridge-like look almost. But if you look at the West Indian bowlers, we're going to talk about them in a minute. But when you're a fast bowler, what's the right physical attribute to have? Because we've seen such an obsession for muscle building and pumping as against fitness that the Glenn McGraths and yourselves showed.
I don't think there's an obsession. I think there's a lot of sports science involved these days. I mean, there is a lot of awareness with fitness. It's just whether you balance it out with your cricket, which is important. I mean, you can't just be in the gym all the time or just be running. You've got to bowl as much. And again, it just depends on an individual. Some guys like bowling longer in the net. Some guys want to conserve the energy. But it depends on what works for you. And it's so important to figure it out quickly because, I mean, look, with so much awareness on fitness, there are guys, I mean...
Quick look at what Best looks like today.
I mean, he's a strong guy. I mean,
you understated, Ajit.
Look at his arms.
Do you remember any bowler in your time having biceps like that, or even aiming to have biceps like that?
I mean, there must be a few around, I'm sure.
It's also interesting when somebody looks like that, and you look in this Test match, his average speed has been about 140 and 140 plus. And you'll have much more wiry kind of bowlers generating more speed. So sometimes it's also, rubber band can propel an object so quickly at anything.
Correct.
So flexibility also sometimes works. Quick arm action to get the speed. Various ways of getting speed.
Yeah, various ways of getting speed, and the one thing that we're talking about West Indian fast bowlers. Now, if you remember the older fast bowlers in the 70s and 80s, you had they're pretty decent. They knew a thing or two about fast bowling. Did Michael Holding and Joel Garner and Colin Croft and Andy Roberts. But if you look at them physically, there's a famous image as well that they didn't look pumped or muscular, but they were very fit. They bowled long stretches. Sanjay, you were mentioning how there was a time when Michael Holding actually bowled through an entire session. You know, recollect that quickly before we got a Mikey on fitness and how bowlers should be? A time that Michael Holding just bowled through?
Yeah, those were guys, who were used to bowling a lot. They bowled everywhere. They bowled in Australia, they bowled in England, so their whole, body was used to a certain kind of action, and all those muscles were nicely honed to do that. If they had to do something else suddenly, they would have struggled. So yes, muscles that were just developed by skill, and it's also about if you have other guys around you bowling at 90 miles per hour, you're not obliged to bowl as quick. So that also, and the trend has changed more towards medium pace and control now.
Ajit, ever bowled through and have a captain come to you and say bowl through the entire session? Did you look forward to those?
Not really. Almost got through a session once,
okay,
but early on. But look, it happens once in a while, really. Yeah. I mean, times have changed. As Sanjay's been saying, it's when you have guys around you who bowl at similar speeds, it definitely helps to motivate yourself to get to those speeds. So, I mean, you're talking about great bowlers, Mikey. I mean, that quartet or 10 at a time at that point, they were all great bowlers. So you don't get those sorts of bowlers
every day, and the fact that they all played in the same team would have been a nice little gift to go. So we've got Michael Holding on fitness and what bowlers should do to keep themselves fit, and the transition between what he and Croft and Roberts and Garner looked like to what Tino Best looks like these days. Take a look at what Mikey says. It's pretty interesting.
Glenn McGrath, I understand, always like to be bowling in the nets, consider themselves getting fit by continuously bowling. I personally didn't particularly like going into the nets. I prefer to go running. I want to be fit by running up hills, running through golf courses, keeping my legs strong. Each individual must do what suits them. It's important that you are strong. I used to go to the gym. You have got to be strong. And if you have to go to the gym to get strong, that's fine. But you don't go to the gym to get bulky. You don't go to the gym to be looking like you're going to enter a Mr. Atlas competition. You don't go to the gym to be going onto the beach and tearing up a telephone book to impress people. That's not why you go to the gym. You go to the gym to be strong, yes. But when you go to the gym, you've got to have the sort of regime and exercise that makes you strong without bulky, which is a lot of repetitions. You don't go into the gym and lift 500 pounds 2 times. You go into the gym, you lift 50 pounds 30 times. That is what you do to get strong, but with definition, but without being bulky. If you get too bulky, in my opinion, you get too stiff. You're carrying around too much weight because muscles are very heavy, and I do not think that is what you need.
That word bulky just sounds so much nicer now when Mikey says bulky. How was your gym regime like? Did you do something like Mikey said, a lot of repetitions?
Later on in my career, I think, when we were more aware of what fitness was about. But again, as he said, it depends on an individual. Once I was in a series or a tournament, I didn't like bowling too much in the net because I had to conserve what energy I had. With Zach, it's the complete opposite. Zach likes bowling long spells. So, it completely depends on an individual. But yeah, I mean, these days, you get in the gym to get fitter for sure. But eventually it has to show in a cricket. And
it showed in Ajit Agarkar's cricket. We saw that image yesterday with some very strong legs, Sanjay, that you pointed out. He's being modest when he says he only did that in the gym towards the end of his career.
Yeah, actually very striking, wasn't it? Yeah. That picture with those muscular legs.
There are some very striking pictures with legs which will come at some point in at match. But hopefully we'll get it at tea with Tendulkar at tea. But stay tuned for that. We'll come to that in just a moment. But yeah, that was Mikey on the West Indian fast bowling till the bowlers that we have today. And the alarming difference was the strike rates. We pulled up a stat a little while ago. We'll try and get that for you if we can, but you can't compare the two. It would be harsh. But is it sad to see what the West Indies bowling has come to from back then to now? Was it always real that it would never be the same?
I think that's something that happens always with anything in life. Nothing is constant. You could see the West Indies quartet that we saw there. All of them, exceptional bowlers.
Just take a look
and
at
they
that.
had the necessary effect on the batsman. And this is a staggering stat for me. Focus on strike rate, which is extreme right. In the 1980s to 1990 era, the strike rate is 48, which is, if for an individual bowler, when you look at the history of strike rate of bowlers, it's in the top 10.
Correct.
Dale Steyn has a close to 40 or something, Waqar is 41, Malcolm Marshall 47. So that's an outstanding strike rate. Things have changed slightly after 2000, where it's jumped up to 78. So 78 balls needed to get a wicket.
The average certainly has changed. Look at that's a good
That's
batting average
more than
to have.
12 overs to get a wicket for the current lot of
Just
Indian
shows
fast
you the
bowlers.
lack of quality. I mean, it's quite glaring. I mean, that's a massive stat, really.
I just calculated 13 overs to get a wicket for a West Indian fast bowler since 2000.
Yeah, that's quite something. Yeah, 80s and 90s that is. So we're not looking at just Mikey's time. We're looking a little after that also. Walsh, Ambrose, they did set a good trend initially, and something's just gone away for the West Indies ever since. Okay, we're fast approaching the first ball, the second session. But quickly, let's just talk a little bit about the fans, and we will get your questions in a moment. But there's something going around, Sanjay, on the Indian fans, the Wankhede fans definitely, and even social media. They don't think it's over yet for Tendulkar. Dhoni declare seems to be trending. Now we saw even during the Pujara wicket when umpire Long gave it not out, there wasn't a roar by the Wankhede, there was silence. There's a lot of emotion, and we understand that, but it's important for fans to be a little touched with reality, or no, that doesn't matter right now.
I think then the sport evolves in India. I think lots of fans unfortunately still look at cricket as an individual sport. And when fans, it's changing now, because there was a time when an Indian was happy that an Indian got 100, and if India lost, now they expect India to win. But everybody has got slightly emotional about this, series, and amazed by how many tweets are coming in saying that Dhoni should declare so that we can see Tendulkar again and things like that. That's losing the plot a little bit. It's the effect of Tendulkar, and it's typical slightly Indian emotions coming into play, where it's slightly detached from reality, and again looking at a sport which is a team sport, which is about in the end winning, and more focused on the individual.
Yeah, Ajit, you witnessed this firsthand once. You were telling me about it at the Eden Gardens. It's not good for a cricketer to feel that as well. The Pujara and Kohli batting out there, knowing the emotion.
I mean, not at all. I mean, these are two young guys who are trying to build their careers. I mean, you need as much support from outside as they're getting from the dressing room. And Sachin would want that first. I'm sure he's not happy with those chants. So I mean, I know him. I'm sure if he could get a message out, he would. That you got to support these guys. I mean, this is the future of Indian cricket, and there is a test match going on still.
Yeah, absolutely, the proper competitive
you
test
mentioned
match.
Eden Gardens. Actually, that was amazing. Did you play that game?
Yeah, I played in the game.
I
mean,
reckon that
I mean, it felt like we were playing abroad, and it was a strange feeling, because Eden Gardens generally is right behind the team, and there was one occasion when we thought we were playing in South Africa.
When Ganguly
Context
was
when
dropped.
Saurav Ganguly was dropped.
And
That's the game. But you have to feel for the other cricketers there and what they'd be going through. They're playing as much of this game as Tendulkar is. But let's take a quick question before we wind up the lunch show at Match Point. Like I said, you can send it in #MatchPoint. But this is the one that we got. Pratik Pawar. His Twitter handle is real Pratik Pawar, so we know this is the original Pratik Pawar. If India bats the second time, should Sachin open the innings? I think he deserves that. Sanjay, Ajit, both of you can have a little romantic note on this one.
It's
Sanjay,
not so much a question. No, he thinks he deserves it.
That's
So
the real Pratik Pawar.
What can you say? He thinks he deserves
well done,
it.
Pratik. Yeah.
But again, it's something that we are talking about. Everyone really caught up in the Tendulkar moment.
Okay, so Ajit, would you tell Tendulkar if you were captain, go have a bat, open up?
I don't think Tendulkar will be keen to open the
I
innings.
think
He's been so rigid about batting at number 4.
Yeah, and he cares about winning more. So,
Yeah, it's okay. So you've got your answer, Pratik. You think so, but I think the guests think it may not happen. But let's see. It's 3 days of cricket left and a lot more cricket to come. Quick update on what the match looks like before we wind up Match Point at lunch on day 2. The West Indies were bundled out for 182 yesterday. Tendulkar got to bat last evening. Started off well, came back this morning. And Pujara and Tendulkar, the unbeaten batsmen. India 282 for 3. Kohli and Pujara at the crease. India lead by exactly 100 runs. Yes, and yes, quickly we'll just go to the pitch, because that was something that we got dead right this morning. Ajit Agarkar, pitch doctor Ajit Agarkar for Match Point. You're getting it right more and more.
No, I think it's just the experience from playing on it last year. I mean, that's not that far back, and it's probably the best day to bat today. And with the West Indians tiring, it could be a long day. I mean, Cheteshwar Pujara is known for getting triple hundreds. Maybe there's one around the corner in Test cricket. I don't want to jinx it, but yeah, I mean, and Virat and Rohit, two really hungry guys to, you know, one's batting with him and one to follow. Could be a long day in the field for the West Indies.
Could be a long day, and if umpire Long keeps going up to the third umpire and Pujara doesn't get out to legitimate catches.
And if Dhoni doesn't declare, there's a good chance India can get 600, 700 runs on this pitch, because it looks a very flat pitch. Shillingford, you've got to take your hats off to that guy, because he's the only guy who's able to get wickets. Also, while the batsmen are defending, not, you know, getting wickets long gone and deep mid wickets. So hats off to him.
Okay, so let's see how this next session goes. I hope you've enjoyed Match Point at lunch. As always, Tendulkar at tea is going to be something special like it was yesterday. So do join us then. Send in your questions, your thoughts with hashtag Matchpoint. And Sanjay, Ajit and myself will be back at tea. Until then, Pujara and Kohli to resume for India. We'll see you at tea. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.